Welcome to the Health Revolution. And tonight I'm very, very pleased to have Richard Cumbers with me. Thank you very much for coming, Richard.
Nice to see you, Clive.
Now, of the many health professionals I know in the UK, Richard is at the cutting edge. And there's very little that Richard hasn't had experience with over the years. He's had far more experience than I have. And you're an expert in Chinese medicine, amongst a number of other things. Energy medicine, perhaps, is what, number one?
Yeah, I mean, I think Clive is very, very flattering. Thank you, Clive. I'm not sure I'm quite that level, but I've certainly been researching energy medicine and getting stuck into what we would consider to be the ways of getting really good non-invasive healing. So Chinese medicine, I think, is one of them. But I suppose I was lucky enough that when I was brought up in the Middle East and to an extent the Far East, and over there, you know, they're taught at schools, if you've got a headache, you push this acupuncture point. And they're shown that. And I just saw the difference between the West and the East. It was very remarkable that in the West, people were, even at school, were told that, you know, if they were ill, you went to see the doctor. And, you know, over in China and Hong Kong and the Middle East, they all knew about the herbs, they knew about massage, they knew about the natural ways of doing it. So I suppose that was my real impetus into trying to find out what was going on, certainly. And I don't know, I suppose the definition of energy medicine would be, maybe you could define it as voltage of cells. So, you know, if the cells have the right voltage, the right substances, in other words, ultimately the right voltage, then you've got a coherent, happy body. Yes. I certainly know there's many people like Jerry Tennant, etc. He's written a book called Healing as Voltage. There's many wonderful books out there, you know, The Body Electric, Energy Medicine, James Oshman, and they're all pertaining to, really, if you get the cells back to the right voltage, you know, you could describe it as Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. So, yeah, I mean, it's great. It's very exciting.
Yeah, so, I mean, in the laboratory, they've kept cells alive forever, haven't they? They've proved that cells actually don't die necessarily.
No, that's very interesting. And when you read things like the Hayflick limit about how many times a cell can divide, and then you look at some of the ancient texts and scripts about these people living for hundreds of years and some 700-800 years, I know there's a group of scientists that said that really the average lifespan should be perhaps 700 to 800 years. And that was, I think they were alluding to the fact that that was the kind of time that you probably get hit by the proverbial bus. In other words, you wouldn't necessarily die, but something would happen to stop you functioning. So I really think we're at the edge of a brave new world. And with all the research done in Russia and the States, and especially now with the internet that's translating things that otherwise wouldn't have seen the light of day for many, many years, we're really getting that information now, and the internet's acting like a global brain, a consciousness to bring that information forward. And I'm probably like a lot of people, I'm just behind that. I'm behind the computer too often, 1, 2 in the morning, because I've got something and we're reading something. So we all need a break, but then again, the things that are coming up now with devices, hands-on healing, essential oils, all zero-point energy, lasers, I think really that even as a home kit, if people had a small outlay, they could probably have 2 or 3 things in that home kit that would probably be more powerful than the facilities in most clinics.
Okay, so what would those items be? What would be at the top of your list?
Well, I suppose people would probably say I'm slightly biased because I started a company called Paying Genie 7 years ago, because I realised that the Scenar technology from the Russian space program was certainly at the forefront or the cutting edge of energy medicine. So definitely I would have a Paying Genie in my toolbox. It's a little device that effectively takes away pain, usually very quickly, or accelerates the healing so that the pain is resolved. And although we don't claim that in Europe, certainly from Russian statistics and the positive side effects of using it, there's a massive acceleration of healing. So certainly you definitely have that one of those devices in that box, and they're relatively inexpensive. Then essential oils, definitely. Now I know you've been doing a lot of research on oils, and you've got 3 books over there, and I know you just recorded a program about essential oils. They're very powerful, and they were using them thousands of years ago. And really, you look at even the scriptures, what did they bring Jesus? They brought frankincense, gold and myrrh. And it's quite likely that gold, in fact, at those times was liquid gold, which was balsam. So the chances are that maybe they brought Jesus 3 essential oils because they were, and I'm not going into the pros and cons of whether Jesus existed or whatever, but the fact that they mention these things is proof enough to show how powerful they were for anointing and for healing. So you'd have some essential oils. I think that you then put in, obviously, just a few good books about diet, raw food, not going for GM modified foods, for example, and trying to stay local. A staple diet of good organic food is a must, good quality water, and then perhaps something like a healing blanket. And again, from the Russian space program, these are blankets that effectively act a bit like orgone generators. They change the frequency of water in the body. They help reflect good energy back to the body. And so there's a huge healing effect. And these are all very simple things you can put into your toolbox. Beyond that, there's a whole range of wonderful health products. I know your company, Ancient Purity, has got some amazing products. I think that's how we fell across each other. And really, I think the biggest thing is to make things simple, because at the moment, most things are very complex for people. They get ill, they look at the internet, there's a plethora of stuff out there, no one knows where to start. They go and see the medical doctor, and by the way, I always say that medical doctors often are trying to do the right thing. Maybe the drugs they're prescribing are not doing the right thing, but certainly to get a diagnosis is fantastic because more information. But it's making it simple, because if someone goes to a doctor, they have no information. They have to rely on everything the doctor tells them. But what's nice now is that people are actually taking things into their own hands or being responsible for their own health. So I think anything that helps them do that in that toolbox. And really, most of the stuff you could put in your own toolbox for under £1,000.
So let's go through those then. Let's just start, because I think it's interesting, with gold, frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense, for example, what would you use that for? When would you use it?
Well,
how would you use it?
I carry frankincense and patchouli and lavender and peppermint and quite a few essential oils around in small bottles with me all the time. One great way of using it is as a perfume, because it's a wonderful scent. Frankincense is very healing. It's very powerful. A lot of people would be using it to aid with their things like cancer, serious disease. It has so many different functions, but it's certainly a big healer. And usually when you apply it to the body, there's this thing called resonance that's set up. So each of the oils will have a certain frequency or base harmonic resonance, so that when you take this oil, it can actually supply voltage to other organs in the body. So for anybody who wants more information on that, just search on the internet under essential oils and harmonic resonance. But effectively what happens is, if you take an oil like peppermint, it has a base frequency of, I think, 70 megahertz. And the brain generally has this similar harmonic frequency. So like if you had a tuning fork and you hit a tuning fork at, say, 432 hertz, another tuning fork at 432 hertz will also resonate even in the next room. But the resonance will happen with anything twice or half the hertz rate. So if you had a 10 hertz tuning fork and you had a 20 hertz tuning fork, you hit the 10 hertz, the 20 hertz will also vibrate, and so would a 5 hertz. This is just harmonic resonance up the scales. So likewise, when you apply essential oils to things like VitaFlex points on the feet, points on the hand, forehead, neck, wherever, they will supply by resonance voltage. And if we're talking about cells having a correct voltage, so if you read about voltage in cells, generally speaking, a healthy cell might be about minus 25 millivolts, which effectively means it's alkaline, it's above 7 on the pH scale, And when you start looking at how healing happens when there's a problem to a cell, the cell has to raise its voltage to up to about minus 50 millivolts to kick off the healing cycle. People with cancer and serious disease have been shown to have a plus voltage, so maybe plus 30 millivolts. And all we're really saying is, if you look at the pH scale, which goes from 0 to 14, and 7 is neutral, anything above 7 is alkaline. And what this effectively means is that anything alkaline is an electron donor, so it's giving electrons. And anything that's acidic, or below 7, is really an electron stealer. So it's acting as maybe you could say like a free radical. So if you start having a sick cell that has lost its voltage or that it's acidic, and if you read, obviously things like the pH Miracle and all those sort of books that show that to alkalize for health, we see that we really want to be alkaline, not acidic. So if we can change the voltage of those cells back to a healthy electron donor, so they can give energy to other cells, we've got healing. So really all those things, like frankincense, just a wonderful oil anyhow. Many studies with sacred frankincense in Oman showing that they've been using it in cancer trials. Things like all the citrus oils. So we're talking things like lemon, lime, orange, bergamot, have been shown to be full of D-limonene. And in many, many trials that I've seen, they're showing D-limonene is a tumour inhibitor. So I think, essential oils are pretty much essential in many ways, because if you look at most of the synthetic drugs that are out there, they are based on plant-based material. So you've got the lifeblood of the plant in that essential oil. I think the main thing is that you have to make sure you have got a real organic Demeter quality essential oil, not something that you just bought and hope it is, because most things unfortunately have been cut or synthetically made. You have to know your oils, that's all. I know that in a previous interview you did with Paul Dean from a company in America where they make their own pure essential oils, the effects are dramatic. So you can carry those around and use them for everything from, take peppermint, 1 drop of peppermint on the tongue, push the tongue onto the roof of the mouth, and often a lot of headaches will disappear because it's been supplied with voltage.
And I've been reading with peppermint that there have been a number of trials with school children giving them peppermint to smell during exams, and some children getting 20% higher marks as a result of essentially switching their brain on.
Exactly, because it's kind of the brain frequency. So these are really, I think, vital things. That if you think about what the French were doing in hospitals a long time ago, they were, and probably still now, they're diffusing the oils into the air, which was killing the germs. Very, very natural. So really, it'd be very nice to have every hospital with a diffuser on each corner, a vibrational diffuser pumping these beautiful oils out there, changing people's emotions and breathing that wonderful oil in, thinking, and just relaxing. And being, most times now you go in, you have these squirt things on the hand, you rub in, and if you look at the chemical names, so these huge long chemical names, you pretty much think anything you put on the skin, well, if you wouldn't eat it, why put it on the skin? Because it'll be absorbed into the body. So essential oils is definitely a fantastic tool in a whole range of health applications. And then you have the scanner technology.
Yes. So just to interrupt, in probably 2 or 3 weeks' time, we'll be showing the interview with Paul Dean that we've been mentioning, which will really be quite enlightening as about how to ensure an essential oil is safe and where to get them. So, yes, let's talk about the Scenar technology. I'd like to introduce this by saying that in the 60s, when there was the space race going on, the Americans realized that pens wouldn't write in space. So they spent millions of dollars developing the space pen that would write upside down in zero gravity. And I love the fact that the Russians, who didn't have $20 million or whatever, took pencils instead. But clearly the Russians had been watching episodes of Star Trek, probably. Well,
certainly. I think a lot of their scientists are quite brilliant. And I think that the issue Russia probably had was they didn't have a lot of money, but they had some brilliant people who were just getting on with looking at experimental ways of looking at how the universe worked generally. And as I say, some of their scientists, without doubt, world leaders. And I think back in the 60s when the Scenar program was first kind of put together, it really, I think, came from the space race, where the Russians were looking at what could they use in space to treat their cosmonauts to prevent them from getting ill. And obviously the Americans had reusable shuttle technology. So if you had a space station perhaps with a lot of astronauts on there and they got ill, you could probably go up to space, pick them back up again and bring them back to Earth and treat them. I think at the time maybe the Russians didn't have that nicety. They had these very large solid fuel booster rockets, and they probably wanted to have something that was new and powerful for use in space. And the information that I've seen, they came up with a blueprint of really 4 things. And they wanted to have a device that was very, very powerful, very easy to use, had to have a very low energy footprint, because anything in space, energy is at a premium, and also had to be very light. I think they achieved that with the Scenar technology. Scenar is an acronym. It stands for Self-Controlled Ergo-Neuro-Adaptive Reflex. It's quite a mouthful, but really all it really effectively, in simple terms, means that you have a device that will effectively mimic nerve impulses, will find blockages, and then will go into a biofeedback with the body and get a massive healing response. I suppose really it takes something often that's chronic, with chronic disease or chronic pain, and makes it acute. So suddenly the body's now very much aware of it, and there is this almost like a new neural connection to what's actually going on. And that's for chronic conditions, but certainly for acute conditions, my experience over 14 years of being involved with this technology, it's dramatic.
So give us an example. Somebody's just had a skiing accident that would normally take, let's say 6 weeks to get over.
Okay, well, I go skiing, and when I go skiing, I usually have a bum bag like this, and in the bum bag I carry certain essential oils. I carry my Pain Genie Scenar, which is we'll show you.
Show them.
Yeah, I've just got to find it actually. I think it's somewhere in here.
So it's worth mentioning that, of course, in space they can't use drugs because they're sharing the water. It's being recycled. So if one person gets the antibiotics, for instance, they all get it. So that was one of the reasons why an electronic device was favoured.
It's actually outside in the car, Clive.
That's all right. I
should have it here, shouldn't I?
One in my bag.
Okay, it's got one in here.
It's good that we're so prepared. As you
So
can
prepared,
tell.
yeah. But really, okay, it's nice to give examples because it shows people the power of this type of thing. I was skiing down the hill. I heard these shouts and cries of pain, and I think it was the girl's first or second day out, never been skiing before, and she'd effectively cartwheeled and ripped a crucial ligament. She was lying there with her husband in a big heap, crying with the pain. I stopped. I said I could probably help her. They asked who I was. I said, look, I'm not a medical doctor, but I think I can help you through this pain if you want me to. And it was pretty obvious they did because she was in agony. I took the device out. I treated her knee. The area where the damage was done was incredibly sticky. This is one of the telltale signs of the body's reaction to try and heal. And in other words, the skin impedance has changed. So the device stuck to the area. I treated it for probably 3 or 4 minutes, and she went from a pain level of about 10 out of 10 to about 1 in 5 to 10 minutes. Because everyone's amazed. I'm not particularly amazed, although I kind of always am, because it's so amazing every time you do it. And okay, she didn't ski again for the week, but she was off crutches within 2 or 3 days and walking carefully, but she at least enjoyed the rest of the holiday. The husband carried on skiing. Now, the alternative to that probably is that she'd be on crutches for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Certainly probably need physio at the end of it. The splint they put onto her leg to immobilise it came off pretty much after 4 days. Again, they were amazed because I did give her 3 or 4 treatments over the 2 days. But it's great because you have a great time, you can help healing, and of course you get your food and beer free. Because everyone's queuing up, can I have a quick treatment? Of course you're going to give them some treatment. But this is why we want to empower people to get their own devices, learn a bit about how the body's working, and just treat themselves. And use that as an adjunct and a massive help to look at the health system now, the NHS. I mean, it's pretty much bankrupt in many ways. We're always told about they haven't got enough money. So wouldn't it be great to help out the medics from a personal point of view And a lot of things that maybe otherwise you might have to go to hospital for, you may not need to.
Here is one. How many hospital visits, what percentage of hospital visits could be saved if doctors were using these?
Well, it's kind of how long's a bit of string.
Or if people were using them at home, in fact.
Sure. I mean, it would be phenomenal. I mean, for example, a leading doctor in 1999, James Colthurst, when he was addressing the Royal College of Surgeons and Nurses, and pointed out that if they put this type of technology into the NHS, they would save, in his opinion, billions of pounds. Now, since that 14 years ago, we've tried to get into the NHS. We've tried to demonstrate this to medical doctors, nurses, and we have a lot of medical doctors maybe using it in private practice. Certainly in Germany and Austria, there's, I think, thousands of medical doctors using it, have been trained on it, although this particular device, what we call the Pain Genie home scanner, although it's a fully powerful therapeutic device, it's very easy to use. It's just to have a DVD and you start using it. So, I think really because it accelerates healing, and certainly probably the biggest problem now with days off work is back pain. Back pain, neck pain, arm pain. So if you just looked at the amount of nurses, for example, who've got pain because of lifting patients in and out of chairs, that alone would revolutionise things. And we just want to try and really raise an awareness so that we want to give people the choice. And I don't think at the moment, certainly in the way things are run, that people are given choice. They're told what they can have for X, Y, Z, and they're not really told there's any alternatives. And this sort of thing is still classed, like essential oils, as alternative or complementary medicine, as though it's complementary to something else. Well, this is very powerful stuff in its own right. So I'd prefer to see these type of things labelled as natural medicine and drug-based therapy labelled as synthetic medicine, because ultimately that's what it is. But, easy to use. Anyone can use it. In acute situations, completely dramatic. Let's say with this girl on the ski slopes, 2 or 3 treatments, and we're talking maybe 20 minutes treatment.
So tell us a bit about the clinical trials that the Russians have done.
Well, there's a lot of information that in Russia, last time I looked, there was well over 300 different papers. Some have been translated from Russian into English. There are other studies that have been done in Australia, America. We did our own study, a basic pilot study in India. We went to the Bioenergetic Research Lab in Pune University at the World Peace Centre. And we set up a trial using this technology. I think there's 2 things to make plain. First of all, there's a number of reverse engineered and cloned devices that have naturally sprung up over the years. And while some of these work relatively well, there's nothing like the real thing. And of course, you want to make sure you get the real thing, because that's where all the research and effort's gone into. And a lot of these other devices will typically claim this research as theirs. It's not. The only company that has done the research is OKB RITM in Russia, came out from the space program. But certainly our study showed that we had 60 people. 30 were treated by a medical doctor with the device turned off, and 30 were treated with the device turned on. All of them had different levels of pain. We're only dealing with pain. We only say in Europe this is for pain relief, or we'd like to say pain resolution. We don't make any other claims. But in the study we did, which was each of these 60 people went through a battery of tests before and after treatment. At the end of the treatment, all the things were tabulated. And I don't know if you've seen any clinical trials. For example, you get 1 asterisk when it says significant, and 2 when it says very significant, and 3 when it says extremely. Well, I think most people would agree that if you've got 1 asterisk for significant, that's significant. And if that was a drug, for example, that means that goes to market. That's my understanding of it. Well, in our case, and we'll publish this soon, a vast majority of stuff came out extremely significant. In other words, we just did 1 treatment down the spine, which we show on the DVD. In other words, these are techniques that we've tried and perfected ourselves over many years. And so someone might have had terrible pain in the foot, in the back, in the head, in the arm, wherever. The treatment was the same. Down the spine and 1 area on the neck. And treatment times were about 10 minutes, irrespective. And we weren't really going into what disease they had, but everyone had a disease behind it. So this was pain related to something else. At the end of the study, it was pretty dramatic. I mean, there's no other words you can talk about for that. So that was just our own study. We had to do it in India because we couldn't afford to do it in Europe or America. But it was done professionally to ISO standards, and that information will again join the massive documentation.
So how did the two groups compare? How many of the 30 with it switched on, and how many of the 30 with it switched
Well, interesting
off?
enough, a few of the control group had it turned off also noticed certain changes because again they were being treated with the device and they were going through the motions of giving them treatment. So there is a placebo effect, I take it, working there, but dramatically different between the two groups. So it was a huge change. And of course, when you looked at the pain levels that went from, say, an 8 to a 1 or a 9 to a 0 after only 10 minutes treatment, that I think is the real proof. I mean, we're very much based, I think, in the West of having all these different trials done. And typically, if a drug company has a trial, it might cost millions. But what we do know recently has been in the press a lot, especially the alternative press, is a lot of these studies have even been fixed. We're seeing that all the time with things coming out now. So when these studies are done, double-blind, placebo-controlled, all the rest of it, some medical doctors I know would say it doesn't mean a thing. Because we want something that in real terms, we're not saying don't go and see your medical doctor with this stuff. We're saying go and see him. Every time go and see him. You've got a pain, go and get a diagnosis. But when he comes up and says, we recommend taking this drug or that drug, then the person should have the choice. Do they want to take the drug? Or maybe they want to take the drug and something natural. But I think right now we're being pretty closed down. I mean, they're attacking homeopathics. We're told that, I saw in the press recently, a leading consultant or someone was saying, homeopathics are very dangerous. Well, if they're very dangerous, then that means they're working. So what's going on? I mean, if homeopathics don't work, how can they be dangerous? And what they're saying is, well, if somebody has a choice between taking the synthetic drug with all these side effects, by the way, all listed off, and taking something that apparently doesn't work, we don't want him going over there because he may not go for the other ones. Well, I'd say, well, let the person make the choice, and if this thing doesn't work, well, by all means, take the drugs. But I think we're being shut down to choice, and it's just narrowing right down where all these sort of wonderful things like oils and 0.1s and healing blankets and natural things like EFT and tapping, all these things, oil pulling, swilling oil around to pull the toxins out of your gums. But we're not really being told about it. So what really our main raison d'etre is to push things through, is to give people the choice. And so sure, we should all work together. The medical fraternity should work more with the natural. I'm not saying that some of it shouldn't necessarily be regulated, but there's so many things that are just regulated to death. In other words, they're shut down via the back door because they may be a threat to, what's going on with selling drugs, for example. And there's a lot of good drugs, but there's a lot of bad ones too.
Yes. So I'm interested in the numbers because I've heard you say previously about the number of people in total who've been cured of their pain in Russia. 130 people had treatments. Can you enlighten us? Because I'd like to get people to understand just how effective this is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the statistics are actually on the website. Can I mention the website? Yeah. It's if you look at the website paingenie.com, so that's paingenie.com. If you look under, I think it's testimonials, you'll see video testimonials, but also a lot of clinical data there. And if you search on it, there's a lot more around. But to give you some idea, when we do shows, for example, like you and I have done together, and we get people from the audience with pain off the street to come up, and they could have back pain, foot pain, wherever, we'll just treat them to the arm. And you've seen this, Clive, haven't you?
It's been amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's stunning. Go on, tell us.
So, and we have recorded most of this, we just haven't edited it yet. So you treat them through the arm, and you explain how the body's working and how the holographic principles and there's channels and meridians. And we usually get them out of pain, either completely or such a massive reduction they can't believe it, just treat them through the arm. And this is, obviously, they say, well, how can you possibly affect my lower back through the arm? It's because they're not quite understanding how the body's really working. So I would say out of 10 people with different types of pain-related issues, you're probably going to take 7 of them to virtually no pain or a tiny amount of pain, and 2 or 3 of them to substantially reduce, just treating through the arm or even the finger. So, but as looking at studies, I think really there's nothing I've seen in my research into natural medicine, things that work, nothing comes close to it. And we lay down a challenge. We've done a lot of the big shows, so like the back pain show in Olympia, Root Health show in Dublin, all these kind of pain-related shows. And we've laid a challenge down. We said, look, we'll take anybody on to prove this over any other system for pain relief or resolution. And so far, we haven't had any takers. I'm not saying there's not a lot of good, other good stuff out there. There is good stuff. But I've seen nothing that comes close to it. So I can't give exact figures, but I think what you've seen yourself already shows, and that's without going to where the pain is. That's without going there. It's just treating remotely. So give you another example. We were in Ireland not long ago, and I was at a little market where I was talking to a homeopath. And a friend of his came up and he couldn't move his arm. His arm was stuck to his body. He had terrible pain about here, about 9 out of 10. And he's a local postman. And he was talking to the homeopath, can you help me? And the guy turns around and says, well, Richard will help you. So I took the device out. I treated him through the arm, not where the pain was. And now there's quite a few people looking at what we're doing. Treatment was about 3 minutes, and he suddenly goes like that. And just goes, I can't believe it, because the pain's gone. And then he's told everybody, which is great. So you will have these type of experiences, and they're wonderful. I think, this is a kind of technology where a family gets one, they treat each other, and see how they're responding. So the great thing is, we would say as a positive side effect of this, the device effectively gives the body energy and information, and the body responds naturally. So if you looked at the Russian statistics for a whole range of different types of disease that were treated with this technology, it's fairly breathtaking. I mean, when I first saw it myself, I thought, can't. I didn't say can't be, but I was highly skeptical. And then when I started using it myself, and I had my first treatment, I tracked down, I think it was 13, 14 years ago, a Russian doctor, the only person I could find in the UK, who had a device. She lived in Salisbury. At the time, I hadn't played tennis for about 18 months because I had a knee problem, and I always had a dull pain. I couldn't play. So I just gave up, and I was tiny bit peeved or depressed about it, because if you like a sport and you can't do it, it kind of a bit annoying. But I went to see her to talk about the technology, and while I'm talking to her, I didn't think about this beforehand, which was strange. She said, well, have you got a problem? And I went, no, actually, I have. So I said, I've got a problem with my leg. I didn't tell her where. And she said, well, take your trousers off. I thought, okay. So, and she scanned my leg with this device, and she told me exactly where the problem was. I was going, that's incredible. And she gave me a 2.5 to 3.5 minute. It was very quick treatment. She told me it was a chronic problem. I need 5 or 6 treatments and down the spine. And I went away after 3 or 4 hours of meeting this very nice, attractive doctor, thinking, wow, this is, and I feel different, but I could still feel this dull pain in my leg. And it was still there about a week later. So I kind of put a question mark by this technology. I thought, well, has it worked or not? But another week later, it was a lovely summer's day, and a friend of mine just came round with some rackets. We went out playing tennis for 2 hours. And later on, I'm lying in the bath thinking, something's different. And I hadn't realised that I'd been playing tennis for 2 hours, and I hadn't even had a tinge in my leg. I couldn't believe it. I thought, right, that's it. I've got to get involved with this. The question mark went away very quickly. And because you have to understand, the body has to heal. So when you're treating people like top sportsmen, or any sportsman for that matter, just because you can take the pain away doesn't mean to say they should go out playing straight away, because it takes time to heal. So, when you're dealing with those sort of injuries, you have to make sure people are aware. Because with a lot of professional footballers I've treated, they've been jumping up and down because it's the first time they could move their ankle, for example.
And you've treated some of the pretty famous ones.
Yeah, we've had a lot of interest, obviously, to treat people. Most of them don't really want their names given out. You can see why. I mean, I couldn't mention names, but I won't. It gives them a massive advantage. So some of the top people in sport are using this Pain Genie Scenar type technology. Some people we can say, well, like one person I can say is people like Djibril Cissé, the French footballer. I first met him through a friend of his. He had an ankle problem. I went up to meet him. I gave him a 5-minute treatment in his kitchen, and he's had some of the top physios in the world trying to treat him. Couldn't do it. 5 minutes, he's jumping up and down. I'm going, hey, just stop jumping up and down. But he's going, wow, it's incredible. So he helped us out. He gave us some testimonials. And then when he went to play for Panathinaikos, the Greek team, they had some of their players who couldn't get well or they couldn't get training. And he flew us out to treat those members of the team. We went out there. I think we gave 3 treatments of 10 minutes, and we explained this combination treatment to make it even better. And all of them were training again very, very quickly. And of course, everyone was amazed. I mean, we weren't. We expected it. But then this is perception and understanding of really that you can accelerate an inflammatory response safely. Because a lot of people would say, well, that inflammation you've got to go through a healing cycle. You're sure, but you can accelerate that. But we all know that now. So it's remarkable stuff.
Well, it is remarkable. I mean, somebody gave me one about 4 years ago to get to use for a year, and they gave me instructions over the telephone as to how to use it. 20 minutes on the phone, and of course, when you get an important piece of equipment like this, you should read the instructions and watch the training videos. But I didn't do any of that. I just turned it on and started using it, and I was getting results right away. I mean, without knowing anything really, apart from a quick telephone conversation. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I still use it all the time, and it's so small you can shove it in your pocket. And for those who want to know, you're talking about £450, something in that area, to buy one. And although one can use it just with the instructional video, I think it's a good idea to go on one of Richard's courses, because I was amazed at how much I learnt on one of Richard's courses. They're 2-day courses, and there's a sort of level 1 and a level 2, and it's extraordinary that this man's knowledge actually is quite exceptional. And you were talking about homeopathy, and I'd like to mention that homeopathic hospitals still exist in England and Scotland. There's the homeopathic hospital in Scotland has been around for over 100 years, and if it didn't work, well, I don't think there'd be a whole hospital operating like that. And of course, the authorities are trying to close it down because it's not drug based, and a patient cured is a customer lost.
But I think also when with the current scientific model they can't prove it scientifically, this is the problem. So we had that big thing with James Randi and Benavista, Jacques Benavista, when he came up and he was showing how water had memory, etc. And then they couldn't repeat the experiment when this team came in because they were changing it by their intention was changing the results. I think it's very about perception. So when you look at these, how we're effectively programmed, I think, especially in the West, from birth by the system, and whether the system meant to or not, I mean, the results are the same. I think they call it premature cognitive commitment. That's the actual term. And what that kind of means, I think, is once you get this programming, your neurons fit into a certain pattern and you believe this is your belief. Of course, it doesn't mean to say it's the truth, because there is only one truth. It can only be one thing, it's the truth. But beliefs can be far-ranging. And the trouble we have, I think, worldwide, and whether it's a relationship where people fall out or get divorced or end up in a punch-up, or countries go to war, it's about lack of communication. And the beliefs get in the way of the truth. And really, this is about choice and getting the truth back. So when people see homeopathics and they can't prove it with their apparatus that they have from a left brain perspective created, and so therefore they're looking for something and then they create something to look for it, but it's over there. And I know the first time I took a homeopathic from a classical homeopath, it almost knocked me out. It was quite amazing. So again, homeopathics, if it's done right, it's fantastic, and of course it doesn't have any negative effects as far as I've seen.
And homeopathy is obviously being used for ophthalmic purposes, for the eyes, and my background was ophthalmic optics. So tell us a little bit about how the Scenar is being used for reversing blindness and improving vision.
Well, I think I think to try and make it simple, because what often happens, and I take your question on board, is that people come along and say, well, what about for vision? What about for this disease, that disease, another disease? And what that really means is that you have to then try and explain it with that disease in mind. Effectively, to simplify the whole process, is when you rub this device over the body, wherever it sticks to, or you feel a heightened sensitivity, is where there's a blockage. So, for example, if you're thinking about eyes, often eyes are related to the liver meridian, for example, and other things too. So if you were treating an area that was sticky, that was related to the liver meridian, you're treating everything on that liver meridian, you're helping the energy for it. So you might find that suddenly the eyesight improved or an eye condition went away. A big area is treating around the neck here. And we find a lot of people, because they have tension, and most people, let's face it, have tension these days. There's a lot of fear going on. Have I got a job? Can I earn enough money? Kids' fees? How can I look after the kids? And all these fear-based scenarios going on. A lot of tension. People are stuck. So when you start treating the neck with this, and you find areas of the neck which are sticky, it releases the tension. And often that means that the blood flow is better to the eyes. So we've had people who have had things like whiplash. So they can't move more than that. They literally can't move maybe 2 or 3, 5, 10, 15 years. You give them some treatment, and within 3 or 4 minutes, their head goes right round. And then they often remember the time that the lorry hit them up the backside. The emotion's processed. There's a huge healing reaction. And then they say, oh, crikey, my eyesight's improved. So I think, but there are many techniques. And so, with this technology, we teach some really good basics about health general and how it fits in. But there's many other great courses out there which are just based purely for that technology. We like to make it simple and say to people, you can take it where you want to. If you just want to look at the DVD and treat somebody without knowing anything about how it works, it's cool, because you're going to get results. If you really want to know about how it's working, then come on a course and take it further.
And I think I'd be right. I just want to give a few dramatic sort of examples. That would you describe what can be achieved? Let's say somebody comes to you and one leg's shorter than the other. You wanted to correct that in a 24-hour period. How would you do that?
Well, so it's an interesting one. Well, a lot of it can relate to how muscles are working in the body and how the musculoskeletal system is working. So if, for example, you've pulled or pushed or constrained one muscle system, it will have a knock-on effect to all the other systems of the body. So often what you'll find is that somebody has had an issue where they've damaged the spine, or certain nerves are damaged, so there's not the proper feedback to those muscle systems in a leg, for example, or a muscle system. And as you start treating with this technology, the body starts accelerating the healing. Now, of course, I make it quite plain. We don't claim anything in Europe apart from pain relief, because that's all it's licensed for. But if we were talking from Russia now about what they've experienced, then a lot of this stuff comes right as the blockages of the body are taken out the way. So if you could imagine the body as, say, 12 major meridians, and there's a blockage, so you've got a hose pipe of energy here, and there's a foot standing on that, blocking energy flow. That, where the foot's standing, could be a sticky area. You find that and you treat it. You take the foot off, you let the energy start flowing. There's a huge neuropeptide response. Muscles start relaxing, coming back into sync. So it's quite possible that if that was a problem with the spine or muscle system, that might change that gait. To give you an example, what's happened, and I've seen information from Russia. There was a girl born in a hospital. When she was born, I think that I think it was a right or left leg was turned round and part of the heel was missing. Now, we know with things like phantom limb pain, if someone loses a limb, how is it that they still feel the pain in that limb? Because the body has a template, an energetic template. Now, in this case, this girl was treated by, I believe, a medical doctor in the hospital who was familiar with this technology. And over a period of 18 months, the foot came back in again and the heel regrew. Now, that's someone with a very vibrant child, etc. But we've seen so many different examples of how major issues have reversed and changed that, I don't know, it sounds almost like you're making the stuff up. I mean, I think this is one of the problems. When we've done quite a few shows and we've had some medical people there, we've had the comment, oh, well, how much did you pay that person to say that? And we just go, well...
It really is like that. I mean, the first talk we did together, we did this talk and Richard had got somebody completely out of pain, and we couldn't shut him up. He was at the front, trying to stop what we were talking about, just to show everybody how he'd suddenly come out of pain. But I've seen people, their whole skeletal structure has changed in a 24-hour period. People who have had 1 inch, or one leg shorter than the other, where the whole thing corrects itself. The whole body just is triggered by the frequencies to work properly. Yeah,
I think the big thing with this is it's easy. So I always say to people that, if you want to get involved with this type of technology, you can just do it. As far as we're aware, and all the studies have shown, it's completely safe. There's a few provisos. So you wouldn't use it with a cardiac pacemaker, for example. But apart from that, it's very simple to use, and ultimately, once you start seeing how you're affecting people, that's all you need to know. So you could be a yak herder in Siberia who doesn't know anything about health. He has one of these, he can find the sticky area, rub the device over the body. The chances are that person will get better, the pain will disappear, and they'll accelerate healing. Or you can be a therapist and say, well, I don't just want to do that, although that's fantastic, but I'd like to work out what that point is. What's this point? How can I change whiplash, pain and blockages in minutes? I mean, obviously, most people want to find out how and that's why we try and give that information.
Okay, so let's say somebody wakes up in the morning, they're just feeling lousy. They've got no energy, they're feeling rubbish, and all they've got is this. What would you do to boost yourself with electrons to create the body voltage, the cellular voltage that you need? Could you use one of these to literally bring yourself back to life again?
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. I mean, certainly, obviously, kidney areas, if they're sticky, you can just rub it over your back, set an option on here and put it on the kidney area. There's points that we can have pads you can attach to the device. You can put one pad here. There's a video on our members area. You put one pad, it's literally in between the nipples, and then you put the other pad on the reciprocal area on the spine, set an option and just turn the device on. It's an energizing technique. And most of these techniques that we've learned with the pads have come from our own experimentation and medical doctors from Austria and Germany, for example, who are using it all the time and saying, wow, just put these pads on and we're getting this voltage change. We're getting this new connection where the body wakes up. But this is just one of many things. I think we put that into the toolbox as number one, probably because it is so multifunctional.
Let's rush through to number two. What's number two for you?
Well, number two for me really is essential oils, because they're relatively cheap. Most of them smell wonderful. Some people even like the smell of dill. I don't. But spearmint's great, and of course spearmint and dill actually there's pretty much the same chemical formula, which is kind of interesting. But they all have remarkable properties. They can be used. You can put several drops of lemon in your Hoover cleaner, your vacuum bag, and best to have a HEPA filter, but it smells of lemon when you do the vacuuming. You can, when you're doing cooking, you can put a tiny toothpick, a bit of oregano into the cooking when you're cooking some sort of Mediterranean type dish or whatever, and the flavour is exquisite.
And would the properties be drastically lessened with the heat of the cooking?
Well, I guess they probably would be, but the fact is, if you're talking about flavour, so you put one drop of lemon oil into a lemon cake, and everyone wants to know where you get the recipe from. Of course, you say, well, I can't tell you, but it's one drop of lemon oil, and it changes the whole dish. But then we are talking about pure organic Demeter quality oils that have, most of these oils have very, very low atomic mass units, all under 350. So if you put it on the skin, it's in the bloodstream very quickly. So I kind of look at people when they say all these essential oils have a big X on the back, the ones that are made in synthetic ways. And they say, well, don't put it on the skin, be very careful. Don't never take it internally, for example, they say. Well, but it's quite okay, is it, to put some in massage oil and massage it in the body and diffuse it and breathe it in.
Or put it in soaps and...
Or put it in soaps. Well, if you've got a big X on there and it's synthetic, well, you don't want it on the skin. So, I think people are being a bit...
Clearly with essential oils, it's vital to know the source. Very, very important.
Yeah.
So let's just go on to perhaps your number three choice then.
Well, one of my favourites, again, comes from the Russian program, and that's the healing blanket.
Yeah, tell us about
it's
that.
called a TMB blanket, thermal multi-layer blanket. And I won't get into too much detail, but effectively what happens, it acts as a sort of organ generator. It re-establishes coherence in water in the body, and allows the body to kick off that healing process. So if I'm feeling tired, I mean, I can often treat myself with the Pain Genie very, very quickly on certain points. But really, if I want to lie down, I just lie in the blanket for half an hour, wrap myself, completely wrap, so just my head's out. And usually within 5 or 10 minutes, you're away. And you have half an hour and you wake up thinking, oh, you want to go and run the 100 meters. You feel great. So if you imagine putting these things together, so what we would do with very chronic people who have multiple issues of low energy. So imagine your cell voltage is shifted to acidic rather than alkaline. Paradoxically, you need energy to heal, but your energy is very low. How do we get the energy levels up? Well, the 1, 2, 3 approach for that is that you treat them with the Pain Genie, often down the spine as a starter. You apply essential oils to the spine. It's called the raindrop technique. And then you wrap them in the blanket. And the results from that kind of 1, 2, 3 fusion, we call it kind of fusion technology, there's a massive synergistic compression. So 1 + 1 + 1 is not 3, it's like 111 or a lot higher than the existing parts. But that's really for chronic people. Well, you could be acutely ill, it's just great to have the treatment. Certainly, we've had people that have put the blanket under their sheet and gone to sleep on the blanket, so they're not completely wrapped in it. And after 6, 7 days, they've noticed their eyesight's improved, their sleep quality is better. So these technologies in their own right are a monotherapy. So each one of these things you could use on its own and get great results. When you combine it together, you get a massive acceleration of change of body function.
So let's say somebody's generally quite well. Should they buy a blanket? And if so, how would they use it?
Well, I mean, I suppose really it depends on what your income is and what you've got to spend.
How much are they, roughly?
Well, the blankets, I think they range roughly from about $349 to $350 to about $500, right, depending on the size.
And how long would they last? Are they going to wear out?
Well, the one I've got personally now is 7 years old.
And I've seen it. It still looks perfect. It looks like new.
It's a bit crinkly, but it works fine. I think really it's up to the person to decide what they want. I find it interesting when I often see people, they go on holiday, they spend £5,000-6,000 going to Jamaica or somewhere very nice, and they spend the whole 2 weeks in pain because the back's hurting them. And when you've seen them beforehand, you say, well, how about getting one of these or trying it out? Because we decided to offer a money-back guarantee because we were so sure about it. And they say, oh, well, but they go away for 2 weeks and don't enjoy the holiday. So I think it's a bit like, why don't you service the car before it breaks down? And if you start looking at these technologies and see how powerful they are, and that's what originally the Russians' intention was, to prevent these people getting ill in the first place.
Yes, well, prevention is everything, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you're looking at having your own toolkit, I suppose it depends what you've got to spend. But certainly, once you understand the technology, I can't imagine anyone not wanting one.
That's quite.
So yeah, if someone's got enough money to buy that and the blankets and some oils, I say under £1,000, you've got the most amazing kit. But why not just start with some essential oils, or start with the Pain Genie, start using it, see the changes. You carry it around, someone hurts themselves, a kid falls over, boom, treat them.
So talking of kids, would you say that a school leaver, for instance, who wanted to learn a profession and really do something of great value with their lives, should a parent buy them one of these and send them on a course? Would they be able to make a living? And I mean, clearly they're going to be pretty gratified if they're healing people all the time.
Well, I'd say obviously yes. To give you an example, we had a chap come on a training course about 5 years ago, and what he wanted to do was he loved skiing, but he wanted to be able to work his way around, enjoy himself, and he thought, well, if I get one of these, even though I'm not a therapist, I can just give someone a demonstration, they can give me a donation. So he came on the training course just to learn a bit more, so he could literally go around the ski slopes doing what anyone can do, and had a great time because he'd go to wherever, Austria or St. Moritz or wherever he's going, and Canada and all those wonderful places. And, the emails come back, wow, this is amazing. They're calling it the Jesus stick. They're following me around, So, yeah, it's great. I think the real thing is, let's go back to Chinese medicine. Let's go back. What do you do if you've got a headache? Yeah. Could you push this point?
Would you like to show exactly where that point is?
Well, it's a large intestine 4. It's this point here. We show it actually on the members area, where we just attach some pads to this device on both these points. And it seems to boost the immune system. It boosts the natural interferon in the body, and things like colds and flus change more rapidly. I think the best thing to live is knowledge. And people, if they have the right knowledge, can make the choice. In our case, the more we can give people a choice, and if you had people leaving home carrying one of these things around, well, if they get ill or they've got a problem, they first of all can treat themselves, accelerate their own healing. My daughter is now 18. She had one as soon as I could give her one, about 9-10 years ago. She carries it around with her, treats herself. Why not?
Yes. Well, good. Well, we're coming towards the end of this particular show. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us as to things that you feel everybody really needs to know about that we haven't covered?
Well, I think the biggest problem at the moment is that we don't seem to be getting good information to people so they can make the good choices. And the biggest problem right now, I think, is the pollution. So if you look at GM-modified food, there is thousands of people out there talking about the problems with the epicite gene, the GM modification, studies produced showing rats fed this stuff get tumours, etc. We just want to make sure that if people can search in the right places to get this information, to change their own, where they're getting their food from, their diet, and do simple techniques. So, for example, oil pulling. One simple technique, you put some pure olive oil or coconut oil into the mouth, maybe a teaspoon of it, or half a teaspoon, preferably 1 drop of lemon oil as well, which freshens the breath. You put it in the mouth, you swish it around for about 20 minutes, and it pulls a lot of the toxins out into the oil, and you spit it out at the end.
Very important, of course, not to swallow it.
Don't swallow it. No, it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be a good idea. But this has changed health, just that simple thing, and it costs you pennies. For example,
a lot of people tell me the results they're getting from oil pulling.
Amazing.
What other cheap and simple techniques do you recommend?
Well, essential oils are cheap, but I suppose really having a relatively good organic diet, simple, good food, especially locally sourced. People's energy levels change rapidly with maybe some good juicing, some nice organic vegetables, a lot of greens. Things like sun gazing. We've had quite a few people who have been, and sun gazing sounds crazy. Everyone says, how can you look into the sun? It'll blind you, etc. Well, I've tried it. I'm up to about 7 minutes. The trouble is you've got to have the sun to do that. And if there's cloud, you can't do it. But you only look at it in the morning or last thing at night. So check out sun gazing.
And water, I know this is a subject that you're interested in. If somebody has no water filter at all, for instance, what would you recommend? What should they do?
Well, from information that we've had back from a number of sources, the drinking water in, especially the West now, most countries anyhow, is contaminated. There's things like copper and lead and barium and aluminium and different type of birth control hormones in it. And a lot of other runoffs, so we're getting glyphosate, we're getting things from organophosphates, from fertilizers and pesticides into the water. And some leading people around are finding a lot of people now are very ill because they're ingesting this. And this is stuff that's actually toxic at parts per billion or trillion. So once it's in the water supply and on the food, if you're not aware of that, you can have major problems. The good news is that simple things like brewer's yeast, so good quality brewer's yeast can actually affect positively the body's response to a lot of these toxins from things like there's been published studies on Roundup and glyphosates and things that have come from that type of product. So really, it's, I think, just getting aware and programs like this, I guess, because it's raising that awareness. And to smile, because the powers are at everyone's own fingertips. They really can change it. And it's dramatic, as you well know, Clive, because you've been doing this stuff for long enough to see the results.
Oh, exactly. So just a quick one on water. Would you, for instance, recommend that people should drink or go out and buy a water alkalizer or just a Brita filter or ozonate the water? What would you suggest?
I guess it comes down to budget, but the most important thing anyhow is to take the chlorine out. So if you get a natural charcoal kind of filter, you get them relatively cheap. You must change them quite often because otherwise you get bacteria building up in the cartridge. But really, I think people have to look into it and look at things like water ionizers, things that can be reverse osmosis as long as the water is remineralized. But there's a whole plethora of devices out there now. One that we rather like and we've seen over the years is, I think the website is theofficialwaterionizer.co.uk. I've had one of the devices for some time. But there's a lot of cheap things you can buy. I think it's just being aware. And if you can get bottled water, get good mineral water, things like, and look for a high pH, above 7. So, for example, Evian, I think, is 7.8 pH, and will be better than having something that's acidic, drinking acidic water all the time. But really, that's kind of a huge subject. And
it's one for another programme.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Oh, good. Well, thank you very much, Richard. And I'd like to say that Richard's website is paingenie.com. My website is ancientpurity.com, and you'll find details of the Pain Genie on both our sites. In the future, I imagine that both our sites will have details on the essential oils, but that's just in preparation at the moment. I believe that is the blanket, are the details of the blanket on your site? Or?
We have some details of the blanket. That's on another website called 21stcenturyenergymedicine.com. That's a 21st centuryenergymedicine.com. And there's some details there from certain trials that were done. I think it was in Russia or Holland, one of the two.
Right, good. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Next week, we haven't had it confirmed yet, but we're hoping that one of the people who was pretty much terminally ill, who recovered using natural means, including the Pain Genie, are going to come on the programme and explain their miraculous transformation. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.